Welcome back, readers and fantasy nerds. Today, uh, I cannot point this at a camera apparently, but Emperor of Thorns, Book 3 of the Broken Empire trilogy. As usual, I'm just going to give vague overview of the book first, and then I'll get into spoilers, and I will let you know when I'm going to start talking about spoilers. But if you've only read books 1 and 2 and you're up in the air on this one, I would say, yeah, you should read this book. I liked the second one the most, followed by this one, and book one the least. But I think they're all good books. It's a good overall series. The first book is fairly short for a fantasy book. It's like just over 300 pages. So this is almost like if you read The Blade itself, the first third of that book compared to like Prince of Thorns is way better than the first third of that book, in my opinion, because stuff actually happens in Prince of Thorns. Shade Throne. But yes, I think you should read Emperor of Thorns, and I'll get into what I think about the entire series in a different video, more spoiler free. I will post that next week, so yeah, whatever, subscribe if you want to see that. Anyway, now I'm going to talk about the spoilers here and what I thought. So, in book two, there's the whole Catherine thing, right? Where there would be Catherine diary entries, and it gave you this perspective on the Prince of Arrow and the prince's brother, whose name I'm drawing a blank on, and what they were thinking, and Sages, and how. So it's like kind of like both antagonists, the Dream Witch branch and the royalty opposition branch. Catherine kind of was a good person to follow both of those plots. In this book, the replacement for that, what I would say is Chella's story. If we compare Chella to Catherine, I would say definitely Catherine's diary entries were much more interesting. Honestly, Chella was pretty boring to read up until towards the end. Her story got better. That being said, it was just a very small amount of the book. And that kind of leads into me talking about the Dead King, doesn't it? Through like the first half of the book, I did not feel like the Dead King was an antagonist that made sense. I mean, it did, but at the same time, who, like, the necromancy element of the first two books felt like a side plot, and then the Dead King was kind of being set up to be like the main baddie. However, later in the book, obviously through Chella's eyes, I figured out, oh, like, this is who the Dead King is. I was not expecting it to be Jorg's deceased brother. But yeah, I thought that was a pretty cool direction to go in. I liked that. For the first half of the book, I thought the Dead King was Jorg's father somehow, and I had this whole conspiracy in my head where his father, who is the Lord of Ancraft, is also somehow the Dead King. And I had this whole galaxy brain conspiracy theory that that's what it was. And I felt like there were some breadcrumbs leading in that direction. I don't know if Mark Lawrence was writing it in that way to make the reader think like the way I was thinking, or if I was just like off in my own universe. But yeah, obviously it wasn't his father. And to me, it was a little disappointing not to see Jorg able to get vengeance or revenge on his father. I mean, there was the gruesome scene in the second book where he brutally murders Jorg's dog, and Jorg's father seems like kind of just like a heartless individual, so it wouldn't be too far fetched for him to somehow reveal himself to be this evil necromancer dead king. But at the same time, that makes the ending where he dies, it's like, and where he like voluntarily dies, make more sense because he didn't really have an interest in ruling the empire. He liked knowing that he could, I think, but he was mostly doing it for revenge and to like flex on people. The ending. Overall I liked it. it seemed a bit quick. The scene with him talking to his brother at the like gates of heaven or whatever, like that was a cool take on, the what happens after you die tropes and stuff. I guess there couldn't really be much more explanation after he died. Just because like he's dead. Like what else can Mark Lawrence write about, if he's dead? Like there's only so much you can say. I know I'm kind of coming across like I didn't like the book that much. I did like the book. If you watch my review of King of Thorns, I talk about all the great things Mark Lawrence did in that book. And they basically all carry over to this book, but I liked this book less than King of Thorns. So I'm kind of trying to like justify why I like it less. And another reason I like Emperor of Thorns less was it kind of fell into like this whole thing of having Jorg have these long dream sequences of things in the past that didn't matter. There was this dream sequence of him talking to like orphans when he was 9. It was like a memory more so than a dream, or it was kind of both. But yeah, um, it would have been like almost cooler to read that in the first book when it was actually more relevant, and it would have been more like character development for Jorg. For this, it didn't seem like most of the dream sequences did much with character development. It was just like another weird way to flashback, right? Like you had flashbacks like the normal way, which was overall good. I like that. Um, and then you had like the dream flashbacks, and it's just like, why? I would have like been more okay with it if I thought the dreams were more relevant, but they just weren't all that relevant, especially considering that like 3 out of the 4 like longest chapters were just these dream sequences that I didn't really want to read about, and it slowed the book down. The reason I liked this series overall was the fast paced nature, and these long dreams slowing down the pacing made me like this book a bit less. But again, good things, world building, great. Does probably even better in this book. Character development, great. Miana, Catherine, Macon, Reich had enough development from previous books. The Northerners coming back, and the guy who's like, watch me, like every 2 seconds. The circus person coming back from the second book, that was cool. Cella coming back, whatever. I like couldn't figure out Cella really, and like yeah, maybe that was more on me. I felt like it wasn't written too bad, but at the same time, I don't know. Oh, and Kai, why? Like I get that like the dead king needs to go into someone's body or whatever, but like he took up a lot of pages for the amount that I cared about him, which was very minimal. And I don't know. Maybe I'm too much like Jorg when I'm reading these books. I just don't care about like 99% of people or their problems because I'm seeing the book through Jorg's eyes, and Jorg doesn't care about like most people or their problems. So maybe that's it. But yeah, definitely cool political intrigue at the end. Um, Definitely more of the world fleshed out and explored. The 4 or 5 years earlier chapters where he goes through Africa, and where he goes to Morocco. Those were pretty cool to just see like a different empire, sort of. Mark Lawrence definitely didn't pull any brain muscles coming up with these names of the African places. I mean, it makes sense that the names would carry over from like our pre-apocalyptic world that we're in right now. And he had done that with Normandy, and there were a few others. In fact, it's possible all these are real places and I just don't know my way around Europe. Like I know Lisboa, Roma, Florence. Oshheim sounds like a real place. That's where the Northerners were from. The Drown Isles being Britain, very cool. So overall, I'm going to give this 4 stars. It was better than the first book, mostly on a more broad set of characters that were developed. And I think it was better written than his first book. The world building was better than in the first book. Like the magic system was better explained. The pacing, this book may have had like the worst pacing just because of, again, the long dream sequences and the early cello parts. Really, we're only realistically talking about 50 to 75 pages of plot that I was not a fan of, but most of the plot in the 400-page book was good, if not great. The ending I loved, even though it was fast. It had to be. The 5 years earlier parts, I liked all of that, and I liked the present day non-Jorg dreaming parts. Those were great. So yeah, that's why it was less good than the second one, which didn't have as many plot issues or pacing issues maybe, or just like boring chapters as this book did. Um, but and then this book was better than Prince because yeah, world building and character development and all that. Overall, I would recommend this series to other people. If you've made it this far in my review, obviously you've read the whole series, so I mean, yeah, you could make up your own mind about whether or not you recommend it to people. But yes, I subscribe if you want the spoiler-free review of the entire series and me overall recommending the entire series. I will probably post that maybe later this week. Why not? Why not? Let's be a little ambitious. And yes. Oh, and honestly, comment a book down below if you want me to read it. I mean, I don't have like a ton of subs, followers, etc., etc. So the beauty of that is I get to interact and talk to people and maybe read a book, buddy read, with a stranger on the internet. What could be better? Anyway, that's everything. Bye.